This is the Learn, Create, Thrive podcast by visualeducation.com. Episode 1. Is AI the end of creativity?
Hi, I'm Carl Taylor. Welcome to the Learn, Create, Thrive podcast. This is our very first episode, and joining me today is creative director, illustrator and artist Tim Godion, video production lead and video editor Ben Toom, and creative marketing executive Emma Harris. And I'm Carl Taylor, photographer and filmmaker. Each week we're going to try and dive into various topics around the creative field. Today we're going to be talking about AI and the risk to the creative industries. Welcome everyone.
Hello.
Hi there, Carl.
Everyone nervous? Our first episode. Woo!
And it's a deep topic as well.
A deep topic.
Definitely going in at the
Quite
deep
a
end.
controversial one, isn't it?
So I'm gonna just roll through the points that we've made, and then I think we can just have a chat about what everyone thinks on each individual thing. Because AI is obviously huge now. Everyone's talking about it. Everyone's worried about it. We've seen what it can do, and talking about seeing what it can do. OpenAI, one of the big ones, they created this thing called Sora, which was AI video. Never thought in my life this would be possible. Ben, you've seen them. I think everyone's seen them. Mm-hmm. It's basically not just images anymore that AI can create. It can create lifelike, realistic video of people doing things that looks like it's straight out of a movie. How scary is that, Ben, for the future?
Yeah, I guess at the moment, at the current stage that I saw it, you could see that it was AI. It still had that sort of like, when you see photos on, I don't know, social media, they've got like 10 fingers on each hand, or they've got like, crowds, the faces all look a bit funny and stuff like that. That it kind of had that look still. So at the moment, I wouldn't be too concerned about it, I reckon. But obviously, if they're at this level already, and
it's early days.
Yeah, they're working on it. Then who knows? But are they gonna start scanning actors and then just AI them in? Because obviously people are still fans of the actors and the directors and cinematographers. I suppose the directors would still have a role because they would direct the AI scenes. But I'm not really sure where it's gonna go. Do people still want to film stuff, light stuff,
Well, that's the question. I think it always comes down to money and budgets. I mean, we've also seen AI being used extensively in illustration, logos, graphics now. What's your thoughts, Tim?
Well, just going back as well to the film aspect, there's a new Lord of the Rings movie coming out, and I've just seen on one of the press releases that they're going to use AI to make some of the actors look younger. So they're going to film the actors as they normally would, but then they're going to use AI to process the image and the footage to reduce the age.
I think that's
of the characters. So that's quite an interesting aspect of using it as a
creative tool. Yeah,
that's what I was going to say. I think if you're just using it to enhance and speed the process up and make things better, for actual creatives, just making their job easier, then it's kind of like a good thing. Whereas if it's just taking over everything, I suppose obviously if it it's going to put some makeup artists out of a job if they're doing that for that, or CGI artists, if they were going to be making them look younger in post. But overall, because that's not actually taking over the whole kind of role, is it?
It's just a creative tool.
A fix, isn't it?
But Emma, I mean, from a marketing point of view, you're all about putting marketing messages out there. AI is deliberately being used in video for creating fake messaging.
Yeah, that's quite scary. That's very scary. And I think almost sort of going back to what Ben was saying, where he notices issues with 10 or 9 fingers or whatever. I think maybe we see that because we work in a creative field. We're engrossed in video, film,
so we're looking
photos.
at it more
We're
carefully.
looking at it. I think your general consumers who are just seeing things don't even realise that the stuff is AI. I know, my grandparents wouldn't have a clue that was made as
so
AI.
they might see a video of Tom Cruise saying something or
Exactly.
or Taylor Swift saying something, believe she's really saying it when it's completely artificial. And I think as well, going back to Ben's point about 7 or 8 fingers on a hand, it's much improved since the first versions, and some of the latest versions I've seen on Sora on OpenAI yesterday were looking even more realistic, even what looked like BBC wildlife documentary shots and things like that. I mean, it's just incredible. For me, what I really don't understand is how it's even possible. I would have thought it would have been the most complicated thing to get AI to do. AI to write a book or write something seems feasible, but how can AI just generate images? What we're talking about here is that it had to plagiarize it. It had to learn it from other sources. And that's something that's, I think, quite dangerous to the market, because AI has literally taken the work of other people to use that base information.
That's right, isn't it? And I think there's a big question as well over the copyright side. Who actually owns the copyrights? If AI is creating the image or the movie or the video footage, then who owns that? Yes, it is prompted by a person, because I've dabbled a little bit. I haven't done much with AI.
But the descriptions are so basic, it doesn't require
it's
any
like half
creative...
a dozen words, isn't it? You put in as a kind of, if you go too complicated, what I've dabbled in, if you put a more in-depth description in, it can't cope with it. So you need a short, succinct phrase of a few key words describing what you want, and then it just churns out hundreds of results.
It's doing this with these minor, small prompts, and it's throwing out a very high level of creativity, if you can call it that, because obviously not even a human behind it, but it's relying on information that it's learnt from other photographers, filmmakers, documentaries, things that it scoured the web from.
I guess it's because you call it AI, but it's kind of not artificial intelligence. It's just taking everything that humans have done in history and then just putting that all together and just churning something out based on obviously a prompt.
But like Tim, how do you feel as an artist if I was to put into some image generating thing, make a painting that is in the style of Tim Godion of a lovely sunset, blah, 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 and it created this image that looks just like your work, which it can do. How does that make you feel as an artist that it could do that?
I think it makes me feel quite uncomfortable, but also as an artist, I really enjoy working like in real paints on canvas or on paper, and it's the texture and the tactile quality. I rarely even get my work printed because I like the effects of how you can layer paint and you get the luminosity of the paints and the glazes and the textures that you can build up, which doesn't always come across even when you get it photographed. As you'll know, Carl, it's very difficult sometimes to photograph an artwork. You have to adjust the lighting, but then especially that can be compensated with clever lighting, the artwork, carefully photographing it. But when you get to print it, it's not possible to print the texture in that and the brush marks.
Yeah, but you're talking about the process of doing that you enjoy, right? Which is obviously, will always be evident and will always be a thing. But what we're thinking about here is also how it's going to affect creatives, because, for example, some of your work has been book covers, illustration, stuff like that. What if the ad agency just cuts people like you out altogether now, and they describe the type of work they want? I've seen it in photography. I've seen photographers or even non-photographers saying, give me a black and white stylish portrait on the street of Paris in the style of Irving Penn. And it's throwing out these incredible portraits that they could literally put on their website portfolio. They wouldn't have had a clue how to make them themselves.
No, that's the scary thing, isn't it? And I think it will have a big impact. And I think it's similar. Like, I've been working as an artist before, really. When I first trained as an illustrator, computers were a very rare commodity. There'd be one computer to share between 30 people in the art college that I studied at. And then being a creative, being an illustrator was very desirable by the ad agencies, because we had a real skill set that they couldn't easily reproduce. And as soon as computers come along, which is probably sort of just history repeating itself now with AI, all these things are tools, that's the way I see them, but they all have an impact on how easy it is to do the task. And if they make the task easier, then everybody can do it, and you don't necessarily need the skill sets that a trained artist, a trained photographer, someone that understands light, someone that understands paints and how you can mix colours, etc. That all kind of goes out the book, doesn't it? And then
it does,
can just
and
write in.
That's a shame, though, because as we were saying before, AI has plagiarized the work of others to learn this, and it's giving anyone the ability to create a stunning fashion image, for example, on location that they never knew how to shoot, they never knew how to style, they never knew how to do anything, but it's just generating it for them on a few prompts. And what does that do to the market? It kind of devalues the creative skills. And I've got a friend of mine who works in business, and he's not interested in the creative world at all. And he just didn't care. He just kind of thought, well, if it can do it, it can do it. So people outside of the creative world don't have the same perspective or the same concerns about it because it doesn't affect them. But I said to him, well, hold on a minute. I said, what's going to happen the day that AI can actually, calculate numbers and do spreadsheets and accounts or architecture or other things in the business world that would affect you? Would you care about it then? Would you be worried the fact that it learnt off of people like you to now take your jobs and your work? And then he started thinking a little bit differently about it, of course, because there's not that many people work in the creative world, so there's not that many people give a monkeys at the moment.
And also, I guess the people in the creative world aren't running the country or anything like that, so they're not the ones implementing the rules on it, and they're the ones being affected. As soon as some of these people start getting affected by it, then suddenly there's going to start being some rules on it.
And I'll tell you who is getting affected by it at the moment. Getty Images, one of the biggest stock libraries, owns it's the sort of umbrella company over most of the other stock libraries like iStock, etc. They've got, I think it's $1 billion lawsuit against one of the big AI ones, Midjourney or someone, because Getty Images realise they're going to be affected the most from this. Getty Images is a stock library. It sells stock images of anything from a doctor looking at an X-ray or a person running through the water's edge on holiday, and those sort of scenes, general lifestyle scenes that people buy for magazines, various publications all the time. Now they could just AI describe it. I tested this myself. I said, give me an image of a doctor looking at an X-ray in a sort of surgery type environment, shallow depth of field, chest X-ray. It did it perfectly. But where did it learn it from? It must have learnt it from places like Getty Images and all those stock images that it scoured. Are Getty right to have a $1 billion lawsuit on the basis that they believe that this AI has learnt everything it knows, mostly from sources like themselves?
I guess they can't know though, can they? They can't know that it's learnt from all their stock libraries unless they do.
Maybe they can see which robots have been scanning, but...
Yeah, because if they went on Wikipedia and just scanned all the Wiki Commons photos, those photos are all there.
Possibly, but I don't think there's anywhere near the quantity. No. If you were an AI, company, where are you going to send your AI? You're going to send it to the resources with the most images.
I guess what's also really dangerous for Getty in that as well is the fact that there isn't specific people in those photos that you need. If you were a photographer shooting an environmental job for a annual report of I don't know, we've got Alex Wallace classes coming out, what the work he does, there's specific people in their specific environments, whereas with stock, it's not at all. It's the opposite of that. It's generic people in generic environments, so they can easily be recreated, whereas Alex Wallace's work, an environmental photographer doing jobs for actual companies with the actual people that work there, you can't replicate that.
You can't replicate that. But if you think about the chain, let's say, for example, you're a stock photographer for Getty. You've got to hire a model, get the props, get the location, do the shoot. You put your work on Getty. It sells for $50 an image, $100 an image. You rely on it selling thousands of times to make your money. Getty take their cut of that, of course. Now, if you decide to do it in AI, you can describe the image, no model fee, no makeup, no location, no props, no nothing. You can just generate an image in under 10 minutes and have it looking amazing. There are so many people in the chain that lose out.
Yeah, but from the consumer, there's no argument to it.
Yeah.
If you're not aware of the industry, you're not aware of the impact that it's having, you don't care. You just want that image now, get it on the website.
And essentially, unfortunately, as Tim knows, most of our customers back in the day were advertising agencies, right? And advertising agencies now are going to be some of the first people to implement and use this technology because they're looking to cut costs. Advertising agencies, for me, have always been about making as much profit as they can, finding the easiest, quickest solution. You know, they get several photographers or filmmakers to bid and quote for a job. They go with the one that they know will do a good job, but they're always looking for price. If they can find a solution via AI that gives them the results that the client's happy with, they're going to be the first to start using this mainstream.
Yeah, and also the people that work in ad agencies are creative, so they've got a vision anyway, so they're going to know how to describe a picture. They're going to know when something looks good. They might not have the technical ability to create that as a photograph, but they know how to see a good photograph that's lit well, that's going to tick the box
and
for their
if it's
clients.
Slightly not quite correct, they have the skills within Photoshop to just polish it up and
That's
finish
right,
it
yeah.
off.
So that's the scary bit. And I think as well, it's like I was saying about when I'm remembering back, making myself sound really old, when computers kind of first came in. When you started using computers as a tool to do illustration rather than just using Sketchpad and paints. And then when stock libraries then came out, the illustration industry, I found, took a big hit because all the low-end kind of editorial style work, an agency or a publisher could then just buy a stock image. And back then, iStock were doing it for $1, I think. You used to be able to buy a...
Well,
so
that's interesting you say that, because it is kind of circular, because if you think about it, if we go back 250 years, there was no photography. We had artists and painters painting portraits of kings and queens and noblemen and all the rest of it. Then along came photography. That ousted artists for a while. Then along came Photoshop, and photographers were worried they were going to be ousted by Photoshop. Then along came CGI, creating images in computer, but having to use 3D skills to do it. And now AI's come along and we have another stage of fear and worry. Maybe we're over worrying, maybe we're over fearing it, but I actually genuinely think this time it is something to worry about.
I think there's just the constant cycle though, isn't it? It's almost like kind of like fashion, you know, like something will be fashionable in the 90s and then it will go out of fashion, then it will come back. Like, you know, like for example, the King just had that massive portrait of himself like painted like a few months ago. So they could have, you know, you could have typed in King AI photo, you know, in a red background, and then it would have been easy to change. It would have been easy to fix, like, but they didn't do that. He got commissioned, you know, an artist, probably paid them loads.
But that's quite a unique sort of usage. I think the biggest effect to the creative industry is that more wide stream usage, in the same sense that Getty images, stock images are used. And as Tim pointed out, when I was a photographer, when stock images and stock libraries started appearing, I was like, oh, this is a worry. But then obviously photographers learned to shoot stock images and sell them to stock, and they had to think in a different way. But there isn't a way of benefiting as a photographer or an illustrator from AI necessarily, unless you just start now making loads and loads of AI images of stuff to put in stock libraries. But the problem is it's so easy to generate and make them. Why would anyone buy your AI descriptions and creations when they can do them themselves?
Yeah, also like with stock as well, like the client or the person who would be buying the stock images can just like, you know, rather than scrolling through the exact right picture that they need, they can just change it. You know, they can just, if they've got like a doctor, like you said, with holding an X-ray, but they wanted it in a classroom with students looking at it, they can just type that in. It's not like they have to then keep looking, or it doesn't exist, or someone's got to go and shoot a whole photo for that. Like they can literally just change it how they want it.
Yeah. Now, Emma, I mean, another interesting, and there's various aspects of AI, and we're not just talking about images. I'm sure you've seen it and familiar with it. Voiceovers. I mean, we've just used David Harewood, fantastic actor and voiceover artist. He does a lot of work for television. We've just used him for a documentary project. Now you've got AI offering its services for creating voiceovers and even copying some famous voiceover artists' work. I've seen some reports on the television where these voiceover artists are complaining that their voice has been already ripped off by AI and being used to replicate a similar version.
I think this is where it's getting scary. I think I've heard some of the voiceovers where it's a celebrity's voice and you can't tell the difference. Like it's not like back in the day where it was like sort of that you listen to an audio book and you could tell that it had been auto-generated because it was really hard to read. Yeah. This is completely different. And I think it's like with text, like I feel like now I can spot text that's written with AI a lot of the time, but the voices now, it's really, really hard to distinguish.
You say you can spot text written by AI, but aren't there now cases of people literally writing their test papers with AI?
There are, but I think there is now software that can determine whether or not that is AI. And I do see from a lot of companies, especially sort of like low-level companies that don't have much, they clearly are doing all their marketing in-house or don't have much budget, and they are just putting in, write me ad copy for Facebook that does XYZ, and you can tell that it follows a pattern of what is being written. And I think that's where people are going to become, I'm probably more aware of it because I'm working in the marketing sphere, but I think people will become more aware of that, and it will maybe turn a little bit the other way where people just want authentic
Or
stuff.
AI will just get better.
That's the
Yeah.
other thing.
Well,
or it's going to get really clever.
This is the interesting thing, though. I think, like, as someone that sort of developed brands for business and that over the years, you're looking to stand out from the crowd with your branding. That's the whole purpose of branding your business, and have your own unique tone of voice, your own unique style of imagery and persona that's out there in the world. So the way AI works is it's just taking a little bit of everything. So it's almost just making a conglomeration of everything that's out there. So everyone's brand could actually end up just being exactly the same.
Well, that was a little
same
bit like
tone
that
of
with
voice.
stock libraries, wasn't
Yes.
it? Some, companies ended up using the same stock image for their adverts because they didn't
Yeah.
buy exclusive rights for it.
Yeah.
And then you'd see one big company using the same image in their advert as another, and that's
Yeah.
a sort of that lack of unique creativity.
And I've had that in the past with some quite big clients where the CEO of the company has suddenly realised that the ad agency has used quite a common stock image for their kind of headline campaign, and had to pull it at the last minute because it's then been also used by a competitor or someone of theirs that they don't want to be associated with. So
Ben, does AI bring creativity itself into question? For example, the whole process of considering yourself a creative, Tim with art and illustration, the way he lays down his paint, the way he does his thing, the style I use for my lighting, the style you use for your storytelling and editing, does AI, the fact that it can do this stuff without very little human instruction and it makes something, does it actually bring creativity into question? Does it mean maybe we were bigging up creativity too much?
I don't really know. I guess with creativity, like if someone's creative, I guess a lot of it is like drawn on like their previous experiences and like movies that they've liked or albums that they've listened to.
But isn't that what AI is doing?
Yeah.
AI is literally scanning everything.
That's
Like
making-
Tim said, it's scanning everything.
It's making just a generic blend of that, I
Yes,
guess.
yeah.
Whereas yours is like, if it was, yourself,
It's more personal to
it's
you.
more niche and it's more like your interpretation of that across
But
multiple
this is
genres.
what worries me, is that you can literally now tell AI to create me a video in the style of Blade Runner or in the style of something. So if you set the parameters and set the style, or as I said earlier, you can tell it to create a portrait image or a fashion image in the style of a certain photographer, and it will do that. You can even feed images into the AI to give it a reference.
I think with like video at the moment though, it's like at the moment AI, I just see it as like useful tools for bits and bobs, where like I think if you had AI like make your actual edit, or like, well, obviously it can't film, so for documentary is safer, like that's a fact, because it can't literally create, and then it would be fake if it did anyway. But like with actual like editing I think if it did the edit for you, it just wouldn't be right. I think it would just feel a bit all wrong and stuff at the moment. So I'm not too worried for that for now. But
I suppose it depends what people's value is in process. So like if every single person had a Damien Hirst, it wouldn't have any value, because if you could just generate that with AI, print it, whatever, blah, 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 blah. But this is about the value of the item or the production or whatever it is as the people involved in it, rather than just the outcome.
Yes.
So that's where maybe within film and art and things like that, it's a bit different to the stock library photography.
Yes,
People
yeah.
care more about the process and about the
But do
people behind it.
Do the people that are involved in it care more about the process compared to what we were
Yeah.
saying, the audience that it's actually aimed at? And I think maybe, yes, in cinema and certain areas of the arts, people will want this unique originality and human input. But in more general mass commercial imagery, they might not care.
Like your sort of like IKEA prints, they're not going to be hiring artists like Tim to do them anymore.
And this is the
generating
problem,
them.
is that the biggest part of the creative industry is across that broader spectrum of smaller photographers, filmmakers, videographers, illustrators, graphic designers. They're most likely to be affected. It's almost like it's an industrial revolution that is going to affect the mainstream middle of the road workers, not the top end necessarily, but more that middle ground. And in terms of, does it bring creativity into question? It's a tricky one to answer, because we've always considered creativity to be a human quality, something that maybe some people have more than others. But it does raise a question about what creativity actually is and means. Of course, AI is potentially just standing on the shoulders of previous really good creatives to do what it does.
I guess like nothing is original these days anyway, isn't it? Like if
No.
so I guess it's the same.
And as you
really.
said, as artists, we learn a particular style or a particular way of doing things because we've liked someone else's work. So essentially, we kind of plagiarized them and their style. I'm sure you've got, Tim, a favourite illustrators and artists and
I've got favourite
painters.
artists and that I do take inspiration from. But also what's really interesting is I do regularly do like painting classes for small groups of people, and the way I structure it is I paint a picture in front of them over a 2-hour session, just a small 30 centimetre square canvas, and I have a dozen students that all paint along with me in kind of effect over 2 hours, and I do it like little easy steps. They do the next step, and then by the end of the 2 hours they've all got a completely different style,
Even though they were following what you...
I've been doing almost a paint by numbers kind of style.
Why
effect.
would you say they had a different style?
Because they just use the brush in a different way, or
Right.
they put the paint down in a different way. Even if I tell them this is how you want to put your brush marks, you want to paint it like horizontally, not vertically in the sky, they will just go and do their own.
Here's a question for you. Let's say you've got a dozen people in this class. Can you look at them, the results, and can you see those that are naturally more talented and those that are less talented? Or do you see things creatively where you go, oh, they've got something about the way they did that was creative or more creative than so-and-so who didn't? It is natural creativity a thing?
Yeah, there is. There's that. What I often see, that kind of natural spark, that someone's got that sort of creative edge over others, or they might have a kind of, they can see the colour, they can mix the colours easier.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest here. Are there some that you look at and you go, that's just dump? Don't come back next week. Are there some that you look at and you just think, yeah, it's going to be a long time for you to get up to scratch?
No, but what I found is...
He's being
but
polite.
yes.
Yeah, he's being polite.
No, I've been really amazed that actually everyone that I've had on my classes in the past have come up with a good result by the end of the evening. And you can normally see their kind of, I always like to work with their particular style, so I don't want them all to end up looking like me. So if some of them, I'm quite painterly the way I like to paint, so I like to use broad, bold, quick brush marks, whereas others are quite more dainty and more fiddly, and they like to kind of smooth out all the brush marks, for example. Some might be a bit heavier with the way they draw stuff, or their drawing might be quite stylized, and that might be down to a lack of ability of drawing, but it always ends up with a nice overall finish painting. And I always like to look at the strengths in their artwork, and actually if their drawing is coming out a little bit more abstract or a little bit more stylized, then let's explore that and let's kind of enhance it.
So that's their creative style.
That's it, yeah.
And what's interesting is that all of those people could have stayed home and done it in AI, but they chose to be there to do it.
That's the process, though,
That's the
isn't it?
process, isn't it?
They're not doing it to make money.
No,
are they?
exactly. And that's what I'm worried about, and this topic and discussions about, is that yes, I believe people will always want to do the creative process because they enjoy doing something. They enjoy feeling something while they're doing it. But in the commercial world, that's not the case. Businesses just looking to find the best result for the cheapest price.
Maybe he'll do the full circle. At the moment, it's only creative industries that are, kind of being affected by it mainly. But if it starts taking over like architecture, politics, I don't know, everything else, like runs the country better because it's, you know, got the whole history of
Yeah.
humankind in its like backlog.
Well, that's a good point, and that's something I want to explore, because I think there is a risk to many other industries. I mean, there are really positive things. AI is being used now in medical scanning because it's more accurate at spotting things on a MRI scan or X-ray than some doctors. So it's using it as a sort of first round to pick out potential problems that people might have. But when you think about certain industries, architecture is based on facts, numbers, figures, weight loads, weight bearings, specific designs and layouts, etc. Rules, if you like, physical rules, engineering, accounting, all of these things, I think, could potentially be massively affected by AI, because if you teach an AI model to do architecture, then you could instruct it, say, give me a house in this style, 3 up, 3 down, terrace, balcony, boom, 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 and feed in a few images and a few things. Surely it can do it. And an architect that would have charged $20,000, $30,000 for the plans, they're going to be affected.
And even stuff that's supposed to be quite personal, like customer support. People are using AI all the time.
Yes.
On
yeah.
the live chats, like we have one on our website, but you can do it so that if it sees keywords in the text, it will just send out a response in the tone of your company. And all that. And that's scary. That's a lot of jobs that could be lost.
Yes,
And,
yeah.
you know, you'd maybe need one person manning the customer support for a big company rather than 50 people.
Yeah. The other scary thing, and we saw some videos on this recently, Ben, is robotics. For people listening and watching, there's one particular video on YouTube from Figure Robotics, where the robot is putting the dishes away and putting stuff in the dustbin, and it's using AI for its communication process, and it sounds like you're talking to a human.
I see a red apple on a plate in the center of the table, a drying rack with cups and a plate, and you standing nearby with your hand on the table.
And it's moving like a
I
human.
don't like it.
Yeah, 'cause mostly at the moment, it's obviously AI is just in computers, so it's just doing like the jobs that can be done in computers. But I guess once you start putting it into robots, then it could potentially do anything.
Yes.
So that's why I was saying it might do the full circle. Like, because if AI robots are doing all the jobs, people are gonna have nothing to do, so they're gonna start doing all the creative things again. because-
Maybe, but who's earning money? I mean,
Yeah.
Well, there's got to be
is
universal
this
income.
the industrial revolution where you get to a point of our, if you like, intelligence, where we develop machines that can do the work, run the power stations, do the farming, do the cleaning, do everything, that we actually all just have a life of leisure and enjoying what we want to do. I think we're a long way away from that, but I think we're going to end up going through some turmoil between now and then getting there, because some industries will be affected first. Some of the robots that we're just talking about, they're actually already working in BMW car plants, moving parts around, loading things and taking things around. I never thought that I would even sort of see that in my lifetime. Even a few years ago, the robots looked pretty clunky and funny and not that, flexible, or, their motion. And now they're moving and walking like humans. They're shaped like humans. They're talking now like humans. AI is going to be a part of that. I know robotics and AI are two separate things, but as they integrate together, are we heading to Terminator days?
I don't know. I reckon this is just the start of like you said, us living in this like perfect harmonious world where the robots do all the stuff that we don't want to do. The government sorts out a universal income for us all.
Well, maybe our grandkids will enjoy that, but I don't think we're going to.
I don't think anytime soon.
I mean, we're going a little bit off creative topic here, worrying about Terminator and stuff. Let's just get back to the creative field. So for me, as a photographer, my prediction in the photography world is that fashion photography is going to be affected the most from AI image creation, and I'll explain why. I might be wrong, but I'm just going to put my neck out and say why. Fashion shoots are probably the most expensive shoot to conduct. You need a location, you need to travel to the location, you need models, stylists, hairstylists, makeup, assistants, gaffers all sorts of people on a fashion shoot, hugely expensive. And I'm talking the big fashion shoots, for the the big brands. And those shoots, essentially, you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars just to even put the thing together. Now, if AI can do it by the fashion house can feed an image of their latest design or dress into AI can create a perfect looking model, no model fees, and the models that AI, I don't want to sound like a perv here, but the models that AI create, that like the female models and male models, they look beautiful, they look stunning. Almost too perfect in some cases. But AI can recreate a location, even a different era, a different time. Yeah. And then it can put the dresses onto the model. It can be shot in a certain fashion. I say shot, but described in a certain fashion. Surely fashion photography is going to be on its knees, because who is going to spend $100,000 or more on a shoot? Way more. That's probably just the costs with the model, etc., and crew. Who's going to spend that money when you can describe the image and get it?
That's a very good point, isn't it? It's the only maybe same factor is, would it dilute the kind of value of that brand if they're just.
But as Emma said earlier, does the general consumer appreciate or recognise
I think
enough?
with fashion photography they do. So I think this is where, like, you see it like the advertising industry is going into influencer marketing, because people don't trust a brand, but they trust a person.
That's a good point.
And I think this is where fashion photography, if people start realising that things are AI, which they're probably going to have to start showing that it is AI at the bottom of ads and stuff. I want to see that Zendaya in a Gucci dress rather than
that's if it's
something.
A celebrity required,
or a lovely model, or a person that I follow online that I've got I feel like I've got a connection to. And I think that's where, whilst I think it might go to what you're saying, I think it would quite quickly shift, because I think consumer trust in those brands would really drop.
Right. Well, I'm just going to point something out here. So for those of you watching and listening, when you get a chance, have a look on Instagram at a lady called Helen Bresnik. Now, Helen's AI work is incredible. She's got an Instagram feed. She's got 105,000 followers at the moment. Have a look at what she's doing in fashion photography, but it's all AI creation. And you look at the incredible images that she creates that are literally almost impossible to create in real world environments. And when I see that, and some of them she's now doing as video as well, when I see that, I do fear for some of the fashion industry. But you may be right, Emma. There may be
I think maybe you appreciate it as a creative more than, say, I would as a consumer to a brand or looking through a magazine or that sort of side of things. But
I reckon there's a period. I reckon there will be some in magazines and stuff for like, a couple of years, and then it's just going to be so like Instagram's just going to be full of fake stuff, and Facebook's going to be full of fake stuff, and magazines that everyone's just like kind of tunes out to it. Almost like goes too far that it's.
But if it's a picture of a handbag, that it's just like a mundane object or such and such, and you can AI it. Does anyone care?
I think with that, I think people don't necessarily care.
But that's your middle market creative work.
That's the thing. I think people work, I think you'll always kind of maybe want to see that realism. It's like the Instagram, it was all people face-tuned, photoshopped up, and now people want to see real people, real skin, real everything.
Got more raw, hasn't it?
It's definitely got more raw.
Yes, yeah. It was interesting what you said about influence as well, which is more of a raw process.
It's even like brands. So back in the day, you wanted to be really professional as a brand and really, have that wall up between you and the consumer. And now you want to see them dancing in the background and making your coffees and spilling things, and you want to see that they're real people.
The
and
story, isn't it? It's the backstory. And I
well,
think
that's interesting.
Isn't it?
Story. That's a really good thing, because even going back to when we were talking about film or anything, even photography, there's a narrative in the images, or there's a story. That's probably the authentic part.
Yeah, and I think that's the important bit with a brand and a business and their branding, is the authenticity of that brand, and the backstory is all part, and it's all tools that you can use as part of your marketing collateral, isn't it? And if you're just generating everything that kind of a conglomeration of everything using AI, that's just going to become diluted, and it may just be that the everyday person will just, at the end of the day, just tune out to it because it's just.
But that's the thing, like people love seeing the behind the scenes of our shoots.
Yes,
Us mucking stuff up, dropping a light, doing things,
Yeah, they
going
don't
out
wanna
on the
see
coast.
behind the
They
scenes
don't
of
wanna
someone
see,
sat at a laptop.
you sat there typing in girl in dress by the sea. They want to see us getting smashed by waves. And I think humans want that and they want to see the real thing. So whilst I think it will change over, I think it might flip back to that sort of thing.
I think definitely on like Instagram, you've definitely seen that shift from like, really high end, shallow depth of field, like stuff filmed in slow-mo, high frame rates or whatever. But now it's just like people filming it on their phones and it feels like more real, more authentic. It's, it's not stock, it's not AI.
Yeah, a little bit more raw and
definitely
grungy.
circle back to that.
Yeah, it is interesting, and I think that maybe that is due to people's pushback against this almost too polished look. There was a period maybe 15, 20 years ago where all the model shoots were like so retouched and the skin was perfect and everything. And there was quite a pushback against that and everyone went a little bit more real. The requests from clients were less retouching, a little bit more natural look, less perfect. So yeah, people maybe do subliminally push back against, this sort of over perfection. Yeah. But my concern is that AI, you can tell it to do something to look less perfect.
You can make it look like a phone.
It's like I saw Ethan Davis, who does some of our
3D
CGI.
CGI artist. Yeah.
He did something the other day on Instagram and it was adding like furry dust to the end of a pen. Like it was like a real close-up of like the nib of a pen.
But that was actually doing it in 3D software, was it?
But if he can do it in 3D software, he's adding imperfections, or we see people adding imperfections to make CGI look more real. Yeah. What's stopping AI from doing that in the future? Adding faults, adding this.
True. And what's interesting is like you think how complicated it is to make like Pixar style animations with 3D characters. You can now describe it to AI and it can generate a sort of 3D Pixar style little movie for you of a character. And what frustrates me about that, and it must frustrate 3D artists even more, is the amount of work needed to make that in 3D software is humongous. Humongous. And then someone with no experience whatsoever can just describe it and churn it out.
I think there's definitely is like a pushback, like with like Star Wars, the original ones were really raw. They're all in costumes, like people in little robot costumes.
A lot of real set builds.
Yeah, and then they went really like loads on CGI, with like the Jar Jar Binks era. Yeah. Those like ones, they were just so CGI, like, and then the newer ones, they went back to like kind of more costumes and props and sets. Yeah.
Yeah, and I agree. But then on the other hand, some of the CGI is now so good that you just accept it. But even that's not really a concern to me because that CGI work isn't AI. No. That's still people really doing creative work in software to generate that sort of look to something. Right, let's just look at a couple more topics before we wrap this up. Photography competitions. There was a year or two ago, a guy entered the Sony World Photo Awards. I think it was in the portrait section, and he won. And it was afterwards they found out the images were generated completely in AI. So what does that say about authenticity? Because the judges at the competition didn't recognize it. They thought it was real. They thought the style of the imagery was so unique, so haunting. It was this sort of strange black and white sepia portrait with shallow depth of field of a lady leaning on another lady's shoulders. And it was quite a haunting looking image. I find AI images always have something that looks a bit dreamlike or nightmare-like about them, where the facts and the form isn't always perfect. And this had a little bit of that, but I think the judges actually felt that was what made it successful. They didn't recognize it. They didn't know it won the competition.
I guess you got to supply like raw images so they know whether it's real or not, and then have other competitions like image making competitions that include CGI.
Or everything's got to be labeled, this is AI. But my point, more to the point really, is how is it that a panel of experienced judges didn't recognize it? They felt it was creativity.
Yeah, because that's the thing, because sometimes we get competitions and we accept the AI images in our
photography. Well, no, we don't accept AI, we accept 3D, CGI because CGI. Work has to be done on that. Yeah.
But sometimes, obviously, with those, there's work done in them. But some of those, like, you notice them, but I don't. And I suppose if these things are getting cleverer and cleverer, there's going to be a point where it's completely inconceivable.
I mean,
what
I've
the difference is.
experimented now creating some fashion images and different images in AI just to see what results it could turn out, and it was very interesting. Friend of the show, Daria Belikova, fashion photographer, she does a lot of work on location, shooting sort of haunting fashion images, but she's started experimenting, creating some fashion images in AI, and they look pretty smart. And I wouldn't probably have recognized whether they were AI or not. I looked at them and I thought, oh, that could be Daria's work, because maybe the way she described it, or maybe she did some post-production work on it, but she experimented to see what it could do. And I'm just a little bit, I'm going to say I'm normally optimistic, but I am being a bit pessimistic. I think AI is more of a negative force at the moment, and I think it's going to have a greater impact than we realize across the middle road commercial world. And I hope you guys are right that it will push back. People will push back against it and want to see more reality or authenticity. But I'm worried that maybe AI will be able to give you what looks like reality, authenticity.
I think certain industries it will, for sure. I think where there's no need for a personal touch, such as stock imagery, such as you've got no connection to the person who made that stock image anyway, that you're not going to care. But for artists and for influencers and for people doing films and directors, you're still going to care about those people.
I'm not sure. I reckon if they made Dune 3 fully AI, they use like Zendaya and what's the guy's name in it? Timothée Chalamet. If they used their faces, put them on, and they fully made it in AI, and it looked like just like Dune 1 and Dune 2, and there was obviously there'd still be a story and stuff to it, so I reckon everyone would still watch it.
But you're a filmmaker, you're an video editor, that obviously puts someone like you out of job.
Yeah, but like you said, people like, I guess the consumer doesn't care.
The consumer doesn't care, but that's what the point is, though. Because the consumer doesn't care, and because the creative industries only account for, I don't know what it is, like 3% of industry, no one cares. But it's going to potentially affect people who are listening to this podcast, listening to this show, people working in this industry. It could disrupt everything.
But also, when there's no people involved, you then don't have a whole marketing campaign around that. You haven't got Zendaya going there saying, "Oh, this is how it was. This is how we were filming." Well, you could if it was all.
They just wouldn't be talking about behind the scenes. They would just be talking about how they love the movie. Or whatever.
But that's not what any of it's about. So I think you would. I don't think things would be able to be marketed as well if they didn't have the people.
Well, I think
them.
we're going to have to pick this topic up again in a future show, because it's an evolving technology. And it is going to evolve, and it is going to have an impact. And it'd be interesting to see in 1 year from now, or maybe even less, what it's done and what it's changed. So for those of you that are listening, a couple of links that you might find interesting. So OpenAI, if you haven't seen it already, take a look at Sora. That's Sora. And you can see the video creations that OpenAI was able to make just from very simple prompts. And actually, they list and show the prompts that they use to create that video. And they're so basic, it makes you wonder, how could such a basic prompt generate that 30-second video clip that looks lifelike and realistic? There are some errors in some of them, you can spot them. But interestingly, even OpenAI are not releasing this AI video creation yet, because they're a little bit concerned themselves about its power. What does that say about it? Then on top of that, have a look at Helen Bresnick on Instagram to see what she can do with AI, because I think you might be surprised and interested to see what's possible. Right, thanks very much, everyone. This is the Learn, Create, Thrive podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. We'll be back again, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
This was the Learn, Create, Thrive podcast, hosted by visualeducation.com.